Welcome to the Partardez channel. Today, we explain Prophets Kings 2, chapter 15 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We're going to completely unpack this text, and honestly, this chapter is a wild ride. It's a story of incredible contrasts. We're talking about a half-century of peace in one place and absolute bloody chaos in another. We're going to walk through every historical shift together so it's perfectly clear. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. First, the context of the divided kingdoms. Second, Judah's stable kings. Third, Israel's chaotic succession. Fourth, the looming Assyrian threat. Fifth, we'll hit our key ideas and lessons. And finally, a quick chapter 15 recap. Let's start with section 1, context, the divided kingdoms, just to set the stage for where we are right now. To make sure we're all entirely on the same page, we are studying this using the Peshat method. Basically, this means we are looking strictly at the plain, literal, simple meaning of the text. The actual history, the real people, the physical places. We aren't diving into hidden, mystical, or allegorical interpretations today, just the raw, powerful narrative exactly as it's written. Moving into section 2, Judah's stable kings. We're starting our story in the southern kingdom, an era defined by some incredibly long, grounded leadership. The chapter officially opens in the 27th year of Jeroboam, who was the king of Israel up in the north. But the text immediately pulls our focus down to the south, to Judah. We're introduced to a new king named Azariah, the son of Amaziah. Now get this, he was only 16 years old when he took the throne. 16! And he ends up reigning in Jerusalem for a staggering 52 years. His mother was Jecoliah. The text is very clear here, stating he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father Amaziah had done. So you have to imagine, this is an incredible half-century of stability for the people of Judah, completely rooted in a king who, for the most part, was walking the right path. But there's a catch. The text specifically notes one chronic, persistent flaw. The high places were not removed, and the people just kept right on offering sacrifices there. Keep that in your back pocket, because it's a huge theme. Now, here's where the story throws us a massive curveball. Even a king who is doing the right thing isn't immune to sudden, life-altering challenges. Despite his long, mostly righteous reign, verse 5 tells us something really shocking. The Lord afflicted the king with leprosy until the very day he died. Because of this affliction, Azariah couldn't just hang out in the palace. He had to live in a separate house. He was essentially quarantined, totally cut off from society and his day-to-day royal duties. Because of this sudden vacuum in leadership, his son Jotham had to step up immediately, taking charge of the palace and actually governing the people of the land while his father was still alive in isolation. I want to pause and clarify a slightly tricky translation here. When our English text says leprosy, it's translating the Hebrew word tsarath. It's super important to understand that in the biblical context, this term was used as a catch-all for a whole variety of really severe diseases that affected the skin. It's not necessarily what doctors today would diagnose as modern Hansen's disease. But honestly, the exact medical diagnosis doesn't even matter here. The point is the consequence. This condition rendered the king ritually impure and forced him into deep social isolation. He literally had to step away from the throne he held for decades. It's a really tragic, sobering end for a king who had brought so much peace and stability to Judah. When Azariah eventually passes away and rests with his ancestors, his son Jotham officially, formally succeeds him. All right, take a breath because we're moving to section 3, Israel's chaotic succession. Prepare yourself because we're about to experience some intense narrative whiplash. While Judah was kicking back and enjoying a solid half-century of stability under one guy, the northern kingdom of Israel goes into an absolute terrifying freefall. In just a short window of time, they cycle through 5 different kings. Look at this rapid-fire turnover. Zechariah lasts just 6 months, then Shallum for a mere 1 single month. Menahem manages to hold on for 10 years. His son Pekahiah gets 2 years, and then Pekah rules for 20. It's basically a spinning door of monarchs. Let's step through exactly how this bloodbath unfolds. We pick up the northern timeline in the 38th year of Azariah's reign down in Judah. Up north, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, becomes king in Israel, but he only makes it 6 months. Why? Because the text tells us he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just blindly continuing the sins of his ancestors. So a guy named Shallum, son of Jabesh, conspires against him. He attacks Zechariah right out in the open, in front of the people, assassinates him, and just takes the throne. Now, what's absolutely fascinating here is that the text takes a moment to remind us that this brutal public assassination wasn't random. It actually fulfilled a promise God had made a long time ago. Generations prior, God promised a former king, Jehu, that his descendants would sit on the throne of Israel, but only down to the fourth generation. Well, Zechariah was that fourth generation, so boom, God's word was fulfilled precisely to the letter. But if you thought Shalom was going to bring peace, you'd be wrong. The horrific escalation of violence just ramps up immediately. Shalom gets his shiny new crown, but he only keeps it for one single month. Another man, Menahem, marches straight up from Tirzah to Samaria, attacks Shalom, assassinates him, and takes over. And Menahem, he is utterly, terrifyingly ruthless. The text gives us a horrifying detail. When a city named Tipsah refuses to open its gates and surrender to him, he sacks the city, destroys everyone in its vicinity, and commits an unspeakable atrocity. He rips open all the pregnant women. It is incredibly dark, but the text is showing us this for a reason. It's painting a vivid picture of the absolute moral depravity, the utter lack of humanity that has completely taken over the northern kingdom. Somehow, through sheer terror and force, Menahem manages to hold on to power for 10 years in Samaria. But he just keeps doing evil, completely ignoring God and never turning away from the sins of the kings before him. And it's during his reign that a massive, existential, geopolitical nightmare arrives on their doorstep. Pul, the king of the mighty Assyrian Empire, who is also known historically as Tiglath-Pileser, invades the land. Menahem is cornered, so to save his own skin and strengthen his precarious grip on the kingdom, he doesn't mount a defense. Instead, he decides to just buy the Assyrian king off. He hands over a staggering tribute of 1,000 talents of silver just to gain his support and make him go away. Let's actually put that amount of money into perspective, because these ancient weights can be hard to visualize. You need to grasp the absolute staggering fortune we are talking about here. A single talent is roughly 34 metric tons. Menahem gave Assyria 1,000 of these. That is an astronomical amount of silver. So where in the world did he get this kind of cash? Well, the text tells us exactly where. He exacted it right out of Israel. He went to every wealthy man in his own kingdom and forced them to cough up 50 shekels of silver each. He completely drained the wealth of his own citizens just to pay off a foreign mom boss, essentially, so he could keep his throne. The Assyrian king takes the mountain of silver and withdraws, but spoiler alert, they're not going to stay away for long. So Menahem eventually dies a natural death, and his son Pekahiah takes the throne. We are now in the 50th year of Azariah's long reign down in Judah, but up in Israel, the cycle of violence is far from over. Pekahiah reigns for only 2 years. Why? Because he too continues the evil practices of his fathers. Then comes the next massive betrayal. One of Pekahiah's own chief officers, a guy named Pekah, conspires against him. It's a total inside job. Pekah takes 50 men, storms right into the citadel of the royal palace in Samaria, and assassinates his own king along with 2 other officials. And just like that, Pekah seizes the bloody throne for himself. Which brings us to Section 4, the looming Assyrian threat. Because while all this internal backstabbing is happening, the outside world is closing in. Pekah actually manages to rule for 20 years, which is a miracle in this context. But it's during his reign that the geopolitical disaster we saw earlier crashes back down on Israel with absolutely devastating force. Assyria returns, and this time, they aren't looking for a silver payout. They want total conquest. Verse 29 details the literal, physical dismantling of the northern kingdom. Tiglath-Pileser storms in and starts knocking down cities like dominoes. Ijon, Abel-Beth-Ma'akah, Genoa, Kadesh, and Hazor. He takes the entire regions of Gilead and Galilee, including all the land of the tribe of Naphtali. And he doesn't just conquer the land. He systematically deports the people, dragging entire communities away into exile in Assyria. The map of the northern kingdom is literally being carved up and carried away. And, incredibly, right in the middle of this catastrophic national defeat, guess what happens? Another conspiracy. A man named Hoshea attacks and assassinates King Pekah, taking over the throne of an Israel that is now severely, permanently diminished. Meanwhile, just as Israel is falling to pieces, the chapter suddenly shifts our attention back south to Judah for the very end. In the 2nd year of Israel's King Pekah, Jotham, remember him, the son who had to step up when his dad got sick, he officially begins his own reign in Jerusalem. He's 25 years old and ends up reigning for 16 years. And like his father, he does what is right in the eyes of the Lord. He's actually quite productive. He undertakes significant infrastructure work, like rebuilding the upper gate of the temple. But just like his father, there is that same haunting caveat we heard earlier. The high places were not removed. Let's really clarify this term, high places, because it keeps coming up. What are they? These were unauthorized, usually elevated locations all throughout the land where the average people continued to improperly offer their own sacrifices and burn incense. Even though kings like Azariah and Jotham were generally considered good kings who followed the Lord, their failure to centralize all the worship at the proper temple in Jerusalem and to completely tear down these high places was a critical, chronic failure. It was basically a spiritual half measure. It left the door wide open for compromise, which the text repeatedly, deliberately points out to us.
Now let's move to Section 5, Key Ideas and Lessons. We've covered a lot of history, but what are the core Peshat insights here? Why does this ancient, chaotic history matter to us right now?
Just look at this comparison. The contrast is absolutely stark. On one side of the board, Judah enjoys long-term stability with basically just two kings, Azariah and Jotham, both of whom die natural deaths, even with Azariah's affliction. On the exact opposite side, Israel is literally collapsing in real time through a rapid, frantic succession of 5 kings and 4 incredibly violent assassinations. The text is plainly showing us that a society built on constant rebellion, rampant corruption, and the total abandonment of its foundational principles will inevitably 100% eat itself from the inside out. So, pulling from the plain meaning of the text, we can clearly lay out 3 practical life lessons for our own self-improvement. Step 1, recognize the devastating consequences of chronic instability. The constant backstabbing and coups in Israel made them totally weak and vulnerable to outside forces like Assyria. In our own lives, constantly upending our foundations leads to the exact same kind of vulnerability. Step 2, understand the danger of repeating past sins. Literally every single king of Israel in this chapter is condemned for the same thing, not turning away from the sins of Jeroboam. The lesson, if we don't actively break our bad habits, they will eventually break us. Step 3, address core issues, not just surface problems. The kings of Judah were generally good guys, but they left those high places completely intact. They treated the symptoms but left the root vulnerabilities alone. We have to be willing to do the hard, uncomfortable work of completely uprooting the negative, compromising influences in our lives. All right, Section 6, Chapter 15 recap. Let's lock in this wildly complex timeline one last time. To recap everything we've seen, we started with Azariah's incredibly long, 52-year stable marathon of a reign in Judah, which ended with his sudden quarantine and his son Jotham stepping in to help. We then watched the catastrophic, rapid-fire collapse of Israel through 5 kings, Zechariah, Shallum, Menahem, Pekahiah, and Pekah, which was marked by 4 totally brutal assassinations. We witnessed the massive, terrifying Assyrian invasion under Tiglath-Pileser, resulting in crushing economic tribute and devastating mass deportations. And finally, we ended right back down in Judah with Jotham officially taking the throne, doing what was right, but ultimately failing to remove those stubborn high places. So, we leave you with this huge, lingering thought as we look toward the future chapters. Will Judah's stability actually last? Or will the looming shadow of the Assyrian Empire, combined with their own unresolved core issues, like those high places, eventually bring them crashing down just like Israel? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.